Hi, it's Leela, the proud poly kinky queer slut. Today's question is, what are some of your ideas about the roots of homophobia in people? I have so many ideas on this. Let me just start by saying that these are my personal opinions. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a sociologist. This is just my take on my personal kind of idea on this. Much like the person who wrote in with this question, I've developed a standard story over time of my best theory. I stand open to change all of these opinions should I be confronted with different information. So, in my view, what I have seen in the world is that hate comes from fear, and certainly collective hate comes from a collective fear. So, on a personal level, I think that people who are homophobic are generally afraid of being ostracized from their communities. I think that many of us who've had divergent experiences and not found home in the communities that gave us birth can attest to if you are different, you will be othered and lose those people. And I think that people who, even if they do not have any inclination to be gay, to be queer, to be gender nonconforming, anything like that, I think that people see that that's what happens to those people, and that in their insides there is a pit of fear on that around that. I also think that there are a lot of elements of culture. Certainly, the culture that I was raised in I was raised in rural Washington State, so rural America, not too far from the city, but far enough that it wasn't the city. And at least at that time, and I think still today, to a large degree, there is a sense that family should be everything, and that you're safe, but there's this overlaying message of if you're not like us, then you don't belong here. That's just constantly there. um, there are a lot of people who have been kicked out of their families, who have lost their entire support structure because they have come out as gay. And also the religious layer on it. There are churches and organizations that are at the center of community, and even if you're not overtly Christian, if you're not the kind of Christian who is tolerant and giving and does not hate queer people, then there's still an overarching culture in these places that says that if you are different, you do not belong here and you will be kicked out. So we as a species are a social species, and we as a community, we band together for safety, for collective support, for nurturing, for care, but also for defense, to take care of ourselves against the other. And this was very important to us as an evolving species. We don't have big claws and fangs. We very much survive by sticking together as a group. Going back to the days of like wandering the plains. And so there's something deep in us about being kicked out of our communities that is terribly fearful and really scares us. Also, the way that we have been taught to raise our children over, like, historically, and this is changing somewhat. I'm actively changing it with my kids, but it has been fear-based. It has been, you will do it as I say, or you will suffer consequences and be hurt by that. And so there is this sense that if I don't do as I'm told, if I'm not the kind of person that I'm supposed to be, if I then I might get kicked out. And if I empathize with the people who are different from me, who are of this other group, then that makes me suspicious and subject to dislike, to hatred. I don't think most people who are homophobic are looking at it like that. I don't think they're aware that this is the thinking, because we as a species are also very, very good at seeing the best in the people that we love and in our group, and putting the negative feelings on others and changing our perceptions, like really truly perceiving things differently when we're at risk, when we're fearful. I do think that the people who are most outspoken in being homophobic and being full of hate, any kind of hate, I think they're people who have a deep fear of being ostracized from their communities, or they're people who stand to gain by controlling the people who are beneath them in that social structure. So let me talk social structures and religion for a minute. So I do want to say that I do know plenty of people of faith who are wonderful people, good, ethical people who do not have hate in them and for anyone, and especially not for queer people. And I want to thank those people for countering this narrative. But I'm going to be talking now about the dogma of the church as we have seen it. I'm going to speak about Christianity, though I understand there are parallels in other faiths, but Christianity is the one that I know that dominates my culture. So there is this hierarchy of God, rulers, be they kings or popes or whomever, and then the layers of rulers, then father, then family. And where the father is the patriarch of the family, this is the patriarchy I'm talking about. I'm talking about the patriarchy, where the father rules the family and everyone has their subordinate place in that structure. People are controlled in that structure by their needs for safety. They're also controlled in that structure by controlling their sexuality, by controlling what is right, what is wrong, and how they can reproduce. Going back, to Middle Ages, those kind of times, people were controlled by their ability to get enough food to survive, basic survival stuff, and then also controlled by who they can have sex with, who they can get that comfort from, who they can get those needs met by. Also, the family unit as a structure in this hierarchical system really emphasizes the need for conformity and fulfilling your role, and that's for the sake of your survival, but in the context of this greater system where if you are othered, then you lose that control, or that safety, that sense of being safe. I think homosexuality being vilified comes out of a desire to control sexuality in order to keep people in line and to keep people adhering to this hierarchical structure and not disrupting the power structure. And I think we see that now in a lot of the homophobic rhetoric that's out there, and especially the transphobic rhetoric that's out there. If you keep people hating the trans people, then it keeps people within their group afraid, because there are a lot of homosexuals out there. And we've always been there, and we're in all parts of the world. But if we're afraid, then we're buttoned up and we're easier to control. And if other people are afraid of being othered like us, then it gives power to the people who are normal, and it helps us all. It helps the leaders keep us all basically buttoned up. This is what I'm actively fighting. I don't want to be buttoned up anymore. I also think that religion frowns on people following their own heart, and I'll do another one of these specifically on my take on religion. But I do think that there is a sense that if you start following your own ethical conscience, your own moral compass, the thing in here that tells you which way is the right way to go. Some people I know would call that the voice of God in their heart, but for me, it's my center. If you start following that and your center's in here instead of out there, then the people who control you have less control over you. And I think that people who are outside of the norms, including homosexual people, are more likely to be teaching others to follow this voice than to follow that voice. This meaning the voice in your heart, and that being the voice of God, Father, leader, government, the other. So when you start trusting yourself above trusting the other, I think that you are actively fighting hate and fighting the control and fighting homophobia, fighting racism, because in my experience, it is those outer voices and the fear that tells us to hate, and not what comes from inside. That's been my personal journey and my personal experience with it. So anyway, that is my take on it. I really think it comes down to fear. It comes down to social control. It comes down to people vilifying queer people as an easy means of othering a group that is not conforming to their standard methods of social control. And ultimately, I think that individual people who are homophobic, I think a lot of them have been taught to fear. I also think there's a lack of knowledge and exposure. It's a lot easier to hate something you don't know So if you haven't been exposed to people who are homosexual, who are good people, who are doing good things, who are, people you actively know, who you consider part of your tribe, then it's a whole lot easier to hate them. So I would encourage everybody to please, you know, take that step and be brave if you have it in you to do. If you have, as a good friend of mine would say, if you have the spoons for it, um, take the step to be brave and to engage with somebody who doesn't see you if it's something that you feel like you can do safely and have the energy to do, because it's a whole lot easier to other someone that you know and love than it is to other someone that you have no concept of, that seems outside of your awareness. So thank you very much for the question. Homophobia comes from fear is the short answer. And thank you for listening. I am Leela, the proud poly kinky queer slut. And remember, you can ask me anything.